We saw it all last week. Iowa stormed the field after a big win against Ohio State.
There was a crazy 3.5-hour rain delay in East Lansing.
And then Miami shocked a lot of people after an 18-point win over Virginia Tech.
And there was bedlam and pandemonium in Oklahoma.
There certainly was. Thank you for watching Red Zone to EndZone. I'm Janae Muchmore.
And I'm Griffin Parkrose.
For the first time since 2004, Georgia and Auburn face off ranked in the top 10.
Yeah, and despite Georgia's 3-game winning streak, the overall matchup throughout the history has been pretty even. They only have 57 wins, and Auburn has 55 to be right up there with them.
So this is a back-and-forth game. Could go either way.
Yeah, and this game has a lot of pride on the line. Bringing that total to 1 game closer would mean a lot for those Auburn faithful. But this Georgia defense is going to look to really crush all of those hopes and dreams early on in the game. They've done it game in and game out this season, being one of the best defenses in the entire country. They've only allowed 4 teams to score more than 10 points on them all season. They wreak havoc. They've controlled the line of scrimmage. There's not much more you really need to say about this defense. It's one of the best I've seen in recent history. It's up there with Alabama this year. And they control the line of scrimmage, not just on defense, but on offense as well. They have a big, burly offensive line, and behind running back Sony Michel and Nick Chubb, they've been able to run the ball extremely well, push back those defensive linemen, and they get tired. You see a lot in the second, third, and definitely in the fourth quarter. The defensive linemen don't look as eager to come upfield and make big hits against Nick Chubb, who's a punishing back. And that running game has been absolutely amazing. It's really helped out their true freshman quarterback get his grips a little bit of the offense. He's improved a lot. This running game has improved because of it. That play-action pass and draw game has grown out of it. It's been really tough to stop this Georgia team on either side of the ball.
And last year in particular, we saw Auburn struggle against Nick Chubb and Sony Michel. They combined for a total of 150 rushing yards last year. Will that happen again? It could. They've been successful so far against the run game, but they have yet to see Nick Chubb and Sony Michel this season. Jarrett Stidham and the Auburn offense create big plays by drawing that secondary, stretching them across the field. That's mostly due to their ability to move down the field quickly, and they have several play options to utilize, making them a pretty balanced offense. Georgia's going to be looking to run as much as they can, but Auburn is good at throwing if they need to, running if they need to, which, if used to their advantage, will help them out as they face this rushing defense. I expect them to start with a combination of both, and if that running game gets shut down, then they're going to be exploiting Georgia's weak secondary.
Yeah, and that secondary is arguably the only weakness Georgia has, especially on the defensive side of the ball. When you talk about Auburn, it's all with a little grain of salt because since their early loss to Clemson, they haven't really played any quality opponents. They lost to LSU, which is probably the best opponent they've played, and LSU's been a roller coaster of a year. It really depends on what week as to what LSU team you're going to get, and even at their best, they're not that great. And the only other semi-quality opponent that you could say that they've played is Mississippi State, who was ranked at the time, but since their meeting has been knocked out of the top 25. And that's probably a good thing for Auburn because Gus Malzahn seems to have a lot of problems with big games. He has a 1-3 bowl record, which is pretty pitiful, especially when you're coaching a team like Auburn that expects to win, especially in those big games, big moments. And Gus Malzahn just doesn't seem to be able to get his team the extra motivation that they need in order to win in those big moments and special teams. Normally, this special teams unit has been amazing. Their kicker is one of the best in the country. But last week, they had 2 blocked field goals, one of which was actually because they had a fake field goal called back because of a holding call, a successful fake field goal nonetheless. And they also gave up a 72-yard kick return, which let the Aggies hang around a lot longer than they should have in the fourth quarter.
And talk about Georgia, they don't really have many weaknesses, but the one kink in their armor just might be the secondary. Despite pass-heavy teams being successful against the Georgia secondary, it has yet to hurt them this year. It could this week, but it might be a fairly low-scoring game. The Georgia defense is going to have to play tighter coverage just in case Auburn does go with more passing options. One other thing, the aerial attack on offense hasn't been the best, but their rushing game is so strong that it hasn't mattered. Under Jake Fromm, they're really relying on those backs, something we haven't seen in the past 2 years with Jacob Eason. But if they need to, for some reason, because they get shut down on the rushing game, they can easily put Jacob Eason back in. He's back, and make those plays down the field.
Yeah, and Fromm has developed a lot as a passer these past few weeks specifically. You've been able to see he's been a lot more comfortable in the pocket. He's using that athletic ability that he showed a lot in high school. That's why Georgia recruited him. But Georgia has one of the best bend, don't break defenses. And what I mean by that is they'll bend, you might get to the other side of the 50, maybe even inside the 30, but you're not going to score against them. You're going to get a field goal. And a big reason why is because of J.R. Reed. You may have heard of his dad, who's Jake Reed. He played 12 years in the NFL as a receiver. Or he has a family of amazing athletes, and he leads this Georgia defense. He's second on the team with 44 tackles. But as a DB, he really has a knack for being involved in the run game, getting in the backfield on blitzes, and he always has his hands somewhere near the ball. He has an interception on the year, 2 fumble recoveries, and a forced fumble.
It's going to be really interesting to see how J.R. Reed matches up with Kerryon Johnson. He's got the most touchdowns in college football right now with 16 this season, and he's just a monster in the backfield, quick on his feet. It's going to be hard for the Georgia defense to catch him. He's only run for less than 100 yards on 2 separate occasions against Missouri and Arkansas. Neither of them have great defenses, but he's looking to surpass last year's season high of 895 rushing yards. But will he be as effective for the Tigers as they face one of the best rushing defenses in the nation?
I personally think he will be, and a big reason why he didn't get as many yards in those 2 games is because he didn't have to play the entire game. They didn't have to use him, and there's no point in, forcing him into those tough situations and getting those extra hits and extra mileage on his body if you don't need to. Personally, I think Georgia's going to have a fairly easy time in this game. I don't think Georgia's going to have much of a challenge until they get to the SEC championship game for the rest of the year, but that's just me.
I do think Auburn is going to give Alabama a contest, but they haven't played anyone notable since Clemson. And I think that's going to show, and they're going to need this struggle in order to get that momentum going so they can beat Alabama. These next few weeks, as we near the college football playoffs, are just going to keep getting interesting as they have starting 2 weeks ago. You have teams and crazy matchups that are just going to produce upsets, various results people don't see coming. And you also have teams that are top programs but have been struggling this year, Florida, Florida State, who are fighting for a chance to even get a bid to a bowl game.
Yeah, and you're going to see those teams like Iowa who really have nothing to lose come out and play their hearts out, and that causes a lot more upsets later in the season.
But if you like this week's episode, feel free to check out some of our others. We'll join you next week. I'm Janae Muchmore.
And I'm Griffin Parkrose.
Thanks for watching RedZone to EndZone.